The Nintendo Switch is now the best-selling Nintendo home console ever, only recently surpassing the Wii. Do you all remember the Wii? Everyone had a Wii. Your parents probably still have a Wii. There's many reasons why the Switch is so popular. It's both a handheld and a home console. It has a huge library of amazing exclusives that just keeps climbing. So why do I, admittedly a bit of a Nintendo diehard, not yet own one? In this video, I'll be going over 3 reasons why I've yet to pull the trigger on a Nintendo Switch. The first reason why I don't own a Switch is the prices. The price of the system, the price of the games, even the price of the accessories. Everyone's financial situation is different, and maybe some of you would buy Nintendo products no matter the cost, but I have certain limits when it comes to video games. It's just a hobby at the end of the day, probably best to not get too out of control. When I was younger, I was primarily a handheld gamer. The systems were cheaper, but most importantly, the games were cheaper. I vividly remember picking up the launch edition of Pokemon Heart Gold way back in 2010. It was something like $40 Canadian, maybe an extra $5 because it came with the Pokewalker. Just recently, I bought Pokemon Legends Arceus for $80 Canadian and borrowed my brother-in-law's Switch to play it. The pre-order came with some slips of artwork from the game. I got a Ho-Oh figure with my pre-order of Heart Gold. Legends Arceus is a great game, and you can hear my thoughts on it in my previous video, but is it worth approximately twice as much as Heart Gold? I'll let you be the judge of that. It feels like with the Switch, Nintendo's found an excuse to charge full console game prices for games that otherwise would have been less expensive on a handheld-only system. Now, normally what I do when I'm faced with high prices is hunt for my video games secondhand. If you know the right strategies and have a bit of patience, you can get good deals. But even though the Nintendo Switch is now 5 years old, the secondhand market isn't what you'd expect. If you want the latest Ratchet & Clank game on PS5, the secondhand prices are far below the initial retail price. And that's a game that came out just last year. If you want Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, a game that initially launched way back in 2014 on the Wii U, the secondhand prices aren't that much lower than retail. Nintendo games tend to hold their value for quite a while, but unlike older Nintendo systems, Switch games are readily available in high quantities. It's also worth mentioning that Xbox and PlayStation run sales every so often, which is a normal thing for any company to do, but Nintendo just isn't having any of it. Why this is the case could be its own separate video. The second reason why I don't own a Nintendo Switch is a bit of a cop-out because it's the same reason why I don't own any current-gen system. Newest isn't always best. Little over a year ago, I bought a Super Nintendo system. I own most other Nintendo systems, but the SNES has always evaded me somehow. You could say I'm a couple decades late to the party, but getting my first ever SNES system and games felt like Christmas all over again. I'm a firm believer that newer games are not inherently better than older games, and when I look at the price trends of retro games these past couple of years, it seems like others agree with me. Super Mario World, Super Castlevania 4, Contra 3, Donkey Kong Country, A Link to the Past. These are all classic games that hold up extremely well, and you're gonna be paying less for them on average compared to first-party Switch games, assuming you just go for loose cartridges. Playing couch co-op Contra 3 in particular is an experience that, in my opinion, hasn't been matched in the modern video game space. Well, maybe Cuphead, but they're still very different experiences. Growing up, I never really had the latest games that came out, the exception being Pokemon games, and that was okay with me. I remember during the late 2000s when all my friends were hardcore into PS3 and Xbox 360, and I just got an N64. I was still amazed by the graphics of games like Mario 64 and Zelda, and poured way too many hours in Smash 64, even with those same friends that mostly played modern systems. When they came over to my house, we played N64, and when I went over to their house, it was free-for-all on high-rise. Ironically, I got a PS3 only a couple years ago, and I had a blast playing through all the COD games. I still regularly play Black Ops 2. If a game is great, why toss it out and move on to the latest entry? Maybe that's just the melee part of me talking. Now, don't get me wrong, there definitely is a benefit to playing games when they first come out, and that would probably be better discussed in a different video, but my point is that you can have just as good of a time, if not better, playing quote-unquote outdated games. My third and final reason why I don't own a Nintendo Switch is the hardware. And no, I'm not about to ramble on about the graphics or anything like that. I'm talking about the form factor. The Nintendo Switch is, in my opinion, the worst handheld system I've ever played. And I've played every major handheld system, only keeping the ones I like best. I could maybe look past the other two reasons in this video, but the form factor is something I can't ignore. I'll be blunt, it's too large and heavy to be a decent handheld, but the real crime is those Joy-Cons. Nintendo really went with the sleek, symmetrical look over any actual ergonomics. I used the Switch I'm borrowing only once out of the dock, and never again. We were visiting my grandma, and I was trying really hard to play Pokemon Legends Arceus. It's a game where you're constantly holding down the right trigger and moving the right thumbstick to aim Pokeballs. 5 minutes in, I lost most sensation in my right hand. I was ready to give up right then and there, opting to watch Bold and the Beautiful with my grandma instead, but I pushed on because Pokemon Legends Arceus is a really fun game. And nobody was murdering each other in Bold and the Beautiful at the time anyways. So I basically ended up taking a break every 5 minutes to feel my hand again. There's a reason why thumbsticks on most controllers are positioned diagonally to the face buttons. Most controllers also have a D-pad, and while some are better than others, the Switch doesn't even try. Joy-Cons are a gimmick, and nobody in their right mind would give someone a single Joy-Con to play games on, unless you hated the person, so it's great that the Switch Lite tosses them out, but Nintendo stuck with the same symmetrical controls because my design consistency. The king of handheld video game system design is still the PS Vita. You may not like it, but this is what peak portable gaming looks like. The D-pad, the thumbstick layout, the weight, the battery life. I'ma have to make a video on the PS Vita someday. It can even switch to a TV pretty seamlessly if you know the right mods, something the Switch Lite can't do. So for now I just see myself using the Switch docked, but maybe I need to try out something like the Hori SplitPad Pro. At that point though, you might as well just bring a whole Pro controller with you. Speaking of the Pro controller, this thing is definitely crucial to have any form of bearable gameplay on the Switch. The Switch is the first Nintendo system that doesn't provide an adequate controller out of the box. Even the Wii Remote, as gimmicky as it is at times, is still a very competent controller when paired with a nunchuck. So although the retail price of a Switch is $380 Canadian, let's be honest, it's actually $470 once you factor in the basically required Pro controller. Now try to get enough controllers to play Mario Kart with your friends and you can see why price was my first point of this video. So that basically sums up why I still don't own a Nintendo Switch. I'll probably end up getting one eventually. I own a Wii U for heaven's sake, but I'm really hoping Nintendo comes out with a model of the Switch that's as portable as the Lite, docks like the original, and please just consider some level of ergonomics in the design. Maybe throw a controller in the box as well. Oh, and keep the OLED screen. Am I asking for too much? But since the Switch is going into its 6th year on the market, the next revision of the Switch could very well be Nintendo's next generation video game console. And if that's the case, then great. I can just use it to play all the Switch games I missed out on, which hopefully should be cheaper by then as well. That's assuming Nintendo's next console will be backwards compatible with the Switch. I can trust you on that one, right, Nintendo?